Agnes Milowka doubled underwater for both female leads in a film about people who can't get out of a flooded cave. It reached Australian screens 3.5 weeks before her own death. On the 27th of February 2011, she went into Tank Cave, 7 kilometers of passage under an Australian paddock, a maximum depth of just 20 meters, water clear as glass. She knew that system better than almost anyone, and she'd written an article about it herself, calling its layout a spider web gone wild. Then she turned into a side passage her buddy couldn't fit through. How does one of the finest cave explorers in the world lose a thin piece of line in a shallow cave? And why did it take 3 days to bring her body back up? There are no caves in her childhood, no ocean either. Agnieszka Milowka is born on the 23rd of December, 1981, in Częstochowa, an industrial city in southern Poland. Her parents take her to Australia. While she's still small, the family settles in Melbourne, and the Polish name quickly sands down into an Australian one, Agnes Milowka. The full Polish spelling survives only in her documents and later's memorial plaques. At Caulfield Grammar, where she studies from 1994 to 1999, she has a reputation for being stubborn and hard to tire out. She's captain of her schoolhouse. Australian schools divide students into houses that compete against each other. She rows competitively, and she's in the running for an academic prize. In rowing, the winner is whoever can put up with monotonous strain the longest. That quality will eventually become her profession. At the University of Melbourne, she takes history and Australian studies, and graduates in 2005. From 2003 to 2005, she runs the university's dive club. Underwater, what pulls her at first is shipwrecks, rusted hulls sitting on sand, ship's bells, working out what happened to a crew 100 years ago. Open water, sunlight above, a way out at any second. In 2004, she comes to Picaninny Ponds, the limestone pools in the southeast corner of South Australia. The water there is so clear you can see the entire bottom. And in that bottom, there's an opening dropping away into the rock. Later, Agnes will point to that moment as the one after which her interest went underground for good. A sunken ship always has an up. In a flooded cave, there is no surface over your head. There's stone. Ascending isn't an option. The only way out is back the way you came. So divers trail a line behind them, a thin cord tied off at the entrance and unspooled as they push forward. That cord is the only map that still works by touch. She's 22. Tank Cave is 7 years away. The diving doesn't interrupt the studying. She collects degrees almost demonstratively. In 2007, Flinders University in Adelaide gives her a degree in maritime archaeology. And that same year, she heads to Florida for an internship in St. Augustine, working an archaeological dig on a wrecked vessel. In 2008, she adds a business degree in marketing and event management from Victoria University. Out of all this comes a personality that's rare in her world. Most people who push into flooded caves arrive from sport or from technical diving. Agnes arrives from the archive. To her, a passage underground is an object that needs describing: where the limestone sits, where the water comes from, what the shape of the tunnel says about its age. She asks the kind of questions people usually ask on the surface, and she starts writing straight away. Over her career, she publishes around 14 articles on underwater exploration. She writes where her colleagues actually read: the newsletters of the Cave Divers Association of Australia and the American magazine Underwater Speleology. She writes in detail and to the point, breaking down specific systems, explaining the logic of a route, and being honest about where it got tight and where it got frightening. That combination isn't common. Usually the person who explores a cave and the person who later tells the world about it are two different people. Here it's one person, which is why an unusual amount of Agnes Milowka's own words survive her. After her death, journalists won't have to reconstruct what she thought of a particular cave. She'd already written it down herself. On the surface, her life looks completely ordinary for a long time. From 2002, she holds a regular job as a marketing manager. The expeditions happen on annual leave and weekends. Cave diving in Australia, in those years, barely pays at all. It's an expensive pursuit where almost everyone funds themselves and drives thousands of kilometers for a few hours underwater. Fairly soon, she'll stop fitting into that schedule. By 2008, she's being invited onto jobs where professional film crews work underwater. The first notable one is the series Water's Journey for the Japanese arm of Discovery Channel. Agnes goes in as an underwater assistant, the person who hauls and holds the gear while the cameraman shoots. In December that year, she lands a spot on a National Geographic and Nova expedition to the blue holes of the Bahamas. These are flooded karst shafts dropping straight down, with passages and chambers at depth. In November and December of 2009, she's back in the Bahamas, this time as a photo assistant for National Geographic magazine. On those shoots, she ends up working alongside Wes Skiles, the American cameraman who filmed most of what the world had ever seen of flooded caves. Skiles publicly notes her potential and brings her onto his projects. For a 27-year-old Australian, that's a rare ticket. It opens doors to expeditions people normally wait years to join. Working for the camera looks more glamorous than it is. In practice, it's hours of hanging in an awkward position, in a tight spot, holding somebody else's heavy lights, on somebody else's schedule. The cameraman needs the shot, which means holding still exactly where a normal diver would keep moving. You can't stir up silt, you can't kick with your fins, and you can't rush, ruin a take, and everyone waits for the water to clear again. That's where she builds what people will later call her defining technical skill, the ability to move calmly and precisely in tight spaces, loaded with equipment without destroying the visibility around her. On a film set, that's about protecting a take. Underground, it's about staying alive. And gradually, she stops being satisfied with holding the light for somebody else's frame. From 2009, she moves into her own exploration, passages nobody had been down before her. The first target is the Elk River system, near the town of Buchan in Victoria. Working with James Arundel, Agnes pushes an underground riverbed, where dry galleries alternate with short flooded sections. A section like that is called a sump. The tunnel is completely filled with water. There's no going around it, so you kit up, swim through, and surface into air on the other side. Then it repeats. The tanks and the reel have to be dragged along narrow, dry passages between the sumps, and that wears you out more than the diving does. Across a series of trips, they extend the known underground riverbed by nearly 1.5 kilometers. Explorers reckon this string of tunnels may turn out to be the longest continuous underground riverbed in the state. That same year, she travels to the opposite edge of the country, to the Nullarbor Plain. It's a vast, waterless slab of limestone in southern Australia, hiding flooded systems underneath. The main one is Cocklebiddy, a long tunnel where a diver travels kilometers from the entrance and spends every meter of it under solid rock. Agnes reaches the halfway point of the line, laid by Craig Challen a year earlier. Technically, that gives her the record for the longest cave dive in Australia by a woman. She herself is restrained about that sort of thing. In this world, records are seen as a byproduct, and what counts is something else. How many new meters you put on the map. After the Nullarbor, international projects start calling, and when people talk about the future of Australian cave diving, her name comes up near the top of the list. She sums up her own motivation simply. She needs to know what's around the next corner. Colleagues will still be repeating that line years later, in a very different context. In 2010, she moves to the other side of the planet. North Florida is the world capital of cave diving. Hundreds of kilometers of flooded limestone passage lie under the pine forest there, and explorers come from everywhere. Agnes takes a job with Dive Right in Lake City, a manufacturer of technical diving equipment, and rents a place in nearby Alachua. Her routine that year is close to an assembly line, the office in Lake City, then the Ginny Springs system, then home. Ginny Springs is a popular spring that thousands of people dive, but its far reaches are open to very few. Agnes reaches the outermost points of the system and quickly finds herself in the same circle as the strongest local explorers. Over that year, she lays more than 4,000 meters of new line in Florida caves, 4 kilometers of tunnel that weren't on any map before her. Baptizing Spring is a story of its own. There, the way forward is blocked by a restriction, a place where the tunnel squeezes down so tightly that a diver with standard tanks on their back simply won't pass. Sections like that get taken in side mount, with the tanks clipped along the sides of the body, and sometimes the tanks come off entirely and get pushed ahead. Agnes gets through that restriction, and behind it, the cave keeps going. In August of 2010, together with James Toland, she does the thing explorers spend years working towards. She connects Baptizing Spring to the Peacock Springs system. The connection adds more than 3,000 meters of passage to the known map. 2 separate caves turn out to be one. In 2011, she's named a brand ambassador for Dive Right. She's 29. Florida is where her working style settles into its final shape. Tight passages, long swims, solo scouting of side leads in places where a buddy physically can't follow. Meanwhile, back in Australia, a film is heading for release that will tie her name to cinema forever. It was shot before she left for Florida. It's called Sanctum. Its executive producer is James Cameron, and the script was written by the Australian explorer and producer Andrew White, together with John Garvin. The plot has a real foundation. In 1988, White's expedition was working a flooded system under the Nullarbor Plain. A storm collapsed the entrance and the group was sealed underground. That time, everyone got out. White took that story and built the film's frame from it, pushing it to the worst-case version. On screen, a team of explorers is trapped in a flooded cave after a cyclone. The water rises, the air runs out, and the group dies trying to find a way out to the sea. The production needs people who can genuinely work underwater in confined spaces. That's how Agnes comes on board. She's hired as the stunt double for both female roles at once. Every demanding underwater sequence for 2 actresses on screen is performed by her. She also teaches the cast the basics of cave diving, how to breathe, how not to panic, how to move without stirring up silt. The work turns out to be long and physically brutal. Underwater scenes shot take after take, in a wetsuit, in cold water, in full kit. For Agnes, it's both a paycheck and a form of recognition. On set, she's the technical authority among professional actors. Sanctum opens in Australian cinemas on the 3rd of February 2011. The film is savaged by critics and makes very respectable money, over $100 million worldwide. For Agnes, it's simply a job done well. In interviews from that period, she talks about the film calmly and practically, with no symbolism attached. Her last dive is 24 days away. The place she'll return to at the end of February sits near the town of Tantanoola, roughly 25 kilometers from Mount Gambier, in the southeast of South Australia. There's nothing to look at from the outside. A paddock, a fence, a modest opening in the limestone on private land. This is Tank Cave. Access is controlled by the Cave Divers Association of Australia. To get a permit, you need the top certification and dozens of independent dives across different systems. You can't just turn up and give it a go. The region has carried a heavy reputation since 1973, when a group of divers died in one of the local sinkholes. That's the event that produced the country's strict permit system in the first place. More than 7 kilometers of flooded passage lie hidden under that paddock. It's one of the longest underwater caves in Australia, and the longest in its state. Its map was assembled over decades, and new connections are still being found. On paper, Tank Cave looks harmless. Maximum depth is around 20 meters. There's almost no current, no decompression, no fighting the flow, no serious cold. The danger there is of a different kind. It's geometric. The passages are low, they cross each other by the dozen, they split and rejoin, and the floor and walls are coated in a layer of the finest silt. In November of 2010, Agnes publishes her own article about the system. She calls Tank Cave a jewel in the crown of the local caves and writes that it's simply impossible to come away disappointed. Shallow, calm, crystal clear water. But in the same piece she gives the other half of the picture. A system like that, she warns, has to be learned gradually, passage by passage. It's far too easy here to run into a restriction and end up with no visibility. She writes that 3 months before she dies in that cave. 2 days before the trip, on the 25th of February 2011, Agnes posts on social media that she's looking forward to the weekend underground. An ordinary message from someone with a good trip ahead of her. Her calendar is full. The following week, she's booked to give a talk at the Melbourne University Dive Club, the same one she used to run. The subject is her work in the caves of the Bahamas. The audience is lined up. The announcement has gone out. She arrives at Tank Cave with a group of divers from Victoria. For her, it's a return to familiar ground. She's been through the system many times. She's guided others through it, and she carries its layout in her head. The plan for the day is a familiar one. Push into an unexplored lead and lay new line into it. By that point, she'd spoken about the risk more than once, and without illusions. Claiming caves are completely safe, she said, would be a stretch. Any trip underground carries a degree of risk. And if you fill the cave with water, naturally the risk goes up. In an interview shortly before that last trip, she said something else that would be quoted more often than anything else. Everything that could possibly go wrong had already happened to her. It wasn't bravado, it was a statement of fact. Over the years, she'd been through equipment failures, lost visibility, tight squeezes, and situations that went off script. And every time, she came out. That's how professional confidence accumulates. Every safe exit confirms that the approach works. Sunday morning, the 27th of February, starts like another working day underground. The group gets in the water without delay. Agnes is paired with a buddy, moving through a well-known section of the system, following the main line that was laid here long ago and is securely tied off. At some point, they reach the side passage, the one they came for. It's tight enough that two people can't pass each other in it, and a second person can't follow in. From there, Agnes goes alone. It's easy to misjudge that decision. This wasn't recklessness, or somebody breaking the rules for the thrill of it. In the exploration diving of that era, scouting a restriction solo was considered acceptable practice. If the passage won't take two, the buddy waits outside while the scout goes in for a short stretch and comes back. The problem is that for the length of that stretch, no backup exists. Nobody is going to hand over a spare regulator, the second mouthpiece divers use to share air. And there's no one to help. A tight limestone tunnel is almost always lined with silt, an ultra-fine sediment that has been piling up for centuries and sits perfectly still until something disturbs it. Anything can lift it. The sweep of a fin, an exhaled breath brushing the ceiling, a shoulder sliding along the wall. According to the reconstruction of events, that's exactly what happened. In the narrow passage, Agnes lifts a cloud of silt, and the water around her turns into an opaque suspension. A torch is useless in that. The beam dies in the murk a few centimeters from your mask. The only way out of a passage like that is to find the line by hand and follow it by feel, running the cord through your fingers. But the line is thin, and it's lying in the same silt. To get a hand on it, you have to guess which side of you it ran along. In zero visibility, being half a meter off means the line isn't there. She doesn't find it. What starts then is a countdown that, in a flooded cave, is measured not in meters but in liters. How much gas is left in the tanks, and how much searching time that supply buys. The standard calculation is simple: a third of the supply for the way in, a third for the way out, a third held in reserve. But it's built around a calm return along the line, not a blind search. Outside, at the mouth of the side passage, her buddy holds position and watches the clock. That kind of wait is standard procedure. The scout goes in for an agreed period, comes back, and the pair continues together. The time passes. She doesn't come back. What follows is standard too, and completely powerless. The passage won't admit a second person, and pushing into a cloud of silt with no line would put another life at risk. The only option left is to surface and raise the alarm. At around 1:45 in the afternoon, the group reports a missing diver. Police and emergency crews head for the cave. The search has one advantage from the very start. Her dive companions can point precisely to the part of the system where Agnes was last seen. The search zone narrows from 7 kilometers down to a single lead. That doesn't make it easy. The police divers have neither the certification nor the training for the far reaches of Tank Cave. So, the first ones in are the people who have both the right and the experience, members of the Cave Divers Association of Australia, people from the same circle as Agnes herself. Many of them know her personally. They have to work in water already clouded by the search and by the dives that came before it. That same night, her body is found inside the system. The exact figures differ between sources. The distance from the entrance was put at roughly 500 to 600 meters. She was in a tight section of passage, in the very cave she herself had described as shallow and calm, 20 meters of water over her head, and 500-odd meters of stone maze between her and daylight. Finding her turned out to be faster than bringing her back. The recovery stretched across several days and became an operation of its own, one that local police compared in difficult to a mountain rescue. The obstacle wasn't depth. For a technical diver, 20 meters is nothing. The obstacle was geometry and silt. The passages are too narrow to move freely with a load, and too silty for the water to stay clear longer than a few minutes. The working rhythm was exhausting. Go in, then wait 3 hours for the disturbed silt to settle. 3 hours on the surface for a few dozen minutes of work below. At the best moments, visibility ran to about 45 centimeters, less than an arm's length. Often there was none at all, and the divers worked blind on the lines alone. 2 days went into clearing and marking the route. stripping out redundant lines, flagging the turns, making the path unambiguous for whoever went in last. The final dive happened on the third day. Her body was brought to the surface shortly before 4 in the afternoon by members of the Cave Divers Association. Police Superintendent Trevor Twilley told reporters that this time the divers reached her in just 32 minutes, against many hours on the first attempts. That was the direct result of those 2 days of preparation. In the team that carried her out was her friend Richard Harris, an anesthetist and highly experienced cave diver. He drew one of the hardest assignments this world has to offer, bringing out someone he knew well. Harris later described what he found there briefly and without drama. Agnes wasn't trapped. From the scene, it was clear she had acted calmly, and that she had gone on looking for a way out. The cause of death was stated plainly: drowning after her air ran out. The full South Australian coroner's report was never made public, so there's no detailed official reconstruction available. Within the community, the analysis comes down to a single chain of events, and it's a short one: a narrow side passage, a solo entry because 2 people couldn't go in, disturbed silt and 0 visibility, a lost line, and then a search by touch, which burns gas faster than calm movement along a route. Usually in stories like this, people ask how an unprepared person ended up underwater. Here it's the opposite: top certification, hundreds of dives, her own published article about this exact system, and none of it was enough. Experience works in 2 directions at once. It sharply reduces the chance of error. A diver like that moves better, calculates gas more accurately, reacts more calmly, and it also lowers the felt sense of threat. Slipping into a tight lead in a familiar cave was, for her, a routine operation she'd carried out hundreds of times. There's also a physical side to it that has nothing to do with anyone's skill. While you can see, finding the line takes seconds. When you can't, that same search stretches into tens of minutes, and your breathing rate climbs while it does. 20 minutes of gas becomes 10. The Australian cave diving community didn't blame her. What they examined was the mechanics of the decisions, exactly where the accepted practice of solo restriction, scouting stops being acceptable, and how you build a safety net in passages built for one. That conversation is still going. Beyond the small circle of specialists, the story went around the world inside a day. There were 2 reasons for that, and the second one eclipsed the first. The first was her name, the author of Connections and First Explorations in 2 Hemispheres. The second was the calendar. She died in a flooded cave 3.5 weeks after the Australian premiere of Sanctum, a film about precisely that, in which she herself played both female leads in the underwater scenes. Headlines around the world were built on that coincidence, often without mentioning what she actually did for a living. The cave diving community took a cool view of that framing. What mattered to her colleagues was different. She died scouting a new passage, doing her ordinary exploration work, not on a film set and not for a shot. The Australian Academy of Cinema included her in its memorial list for 2011. Professional recognition came quickly. In May of 2011, the cave diving section of the National Speleological Society in the United States gave her a posthumous award for exploration. A memorial prize in environmental science was established in her name, and 3 places underground now carry her name, the accepted form of remembrance in this world. In Old Wolgan Cave on the Nullarbor, there's now Ag's Dreamtime Passage. In Davies Cave, there's Agnes Chamber. In the Elk River system, the one she extended herself, a section was named Milowka Canal. What she left behind is her own writing, her photographs, and her video, which is why in this story you can hear her directly. Richard Harris, who brought her out of Tank Cave, took part in the rescue of a group from a flooded cave in Thailand in 2018. The operation the whole world watched, and every one of the people trapped underground came out alive. Tank Cave is still open to permit holders. More than 7 kilometers of passage, 20 meters of depth, clear water, and a spider web gone wild.